This is the Better Ottawa Municipal Panel. Today is Friday, the 16th of January, 2026. I'm in the Rogers studio, and as always, I'm joined by Joanne Chianello and John Willing. Hello to you both.
Hello. Happy New Year to you both.
Happy New Year. Can we say Happy New Year? You say Happy New Year all through January.
Happy New Year to the end of January. The first time I see people, I don't care what other folks say. Those are my rules.
It is our first time together in 2026. So tell us, what have you been up to over the past few weeks?
Oh, so many exciting things. Drinking a lot of hot coffee and shortbread. Basically, my body weight in shortbread most days. I'm trying to end that. No, I had a great holiday, saw lots of family and friends, whipped back to Toronto a couple of times where my family is from, skated at the local rink, which was lovely, and just kind of laid low, and now just, gearing up for a very exciting year.
John, how were your holidays?
They're great. Did a little traveling to Southern Ontario also. Drove through a snowstorm on Boxing Day.
Fun.
Lost a minor piece of my car along the way on the 401. Talk about that after the show. But we're good. We made it back in one piece. Otherwise, spent some time on some outdoor rinks as well, playing some shinny. And
really, and you have a young son. That's always fun at the holidays.
Yes, we do. And going out and playing some hockey and getting some exercise and staying warm right now, because the day we're taping here, guys, is like the coldest day of the winter so far, without a doubt.
I would like to say that this morning I cleared my storm sewer. I don't know why I chose today. That was my
Order of Ottawa.
I just thought, let's start 2026 with a good civic deed.
You.
I didn't even photograph it for my Instagram. So
Well, speaking of cold, this was one of the first years that the Rideau Canal Skateway opened up before New Year's. One of the first times I can remember in decades.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that bodes well, obviously, for the city. I mean, it rained a few days later, though, I think.
But with this cold, it'll open up. How about you? You traveled at Christmas.
Well, we did. We went out west. My brother has a place in Rosslyn, BC. And so we had a bit of a family reunion there, which was fabulous. There was one area that I was a little disappointed with. We'd been there last year also. Same place, same time, and there's a ski mountain there called Red Mountain. And a year ago, who happened to be at the resort at the time but no other than Justin Trudeau? So the one thing that we were hoping for, going back this year, was that not only would he be there, but Katy Perry too. And unfortunately, that did not happen.
Maybe next year. Maybe next year. Yes.
Well, listen, 2026. We know that this is going to be an election year, so a big year for in Ottawa city politics. And John, maybe you can get us started off here, because we had some reporting from Arthur Crummy White of CBC. He went and contacted all the incumbent councillors and asked them what their intentions were for next year. So what do we know, and any surprises?
Yeah, exactly that. This is not my reporting. This is CBC. And actually, I think the Ottawa Lookout, too, went around and canvassed councillors. Sounds like everyone plans to run again, but there's, at this point, a few unknowns. I wrote them down. We haven't heard yet from Matt Luloff over in Orleans East, Cumberland. Glenn Gower hasn't said either way yet. Stetsville, Tim Tierney, Beacon Hill, Surville, and Marty Carr in Alta Vista Ward. Yeah,
and I think for Marty Carr, I think technically she is still a public servant, right? I think she's on leave from the public service. So I think, and I remember this with some other councillors in the past, you really can't say you're running until you get permission or tell the public service. So that might be why she's waiting. Glenn Gower has kind of said he's not sure for some time now, so this is not new. Matt Luloff was in the news this week for some unfortunate reasons, and he'll be in court coming up for a driving under the influence charge that has been going on a long, long time, so maybe he'd like to get that under his belt. I don't know. I haven't talked to him, but I'm just saying that. And Tim Tierney, who knows what Tim Tierney's thinking?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe sometimes as a candidate, you want supreme control over your announcement, even if you've been on council for many years. You want to have a big whiz-bang-pow moment and announce it with a lot of fanfare. And so maybe if you're a candidate, I don't know for Councillor Tierney, but maybe he's just waiting to make an announcement at his own time.
So, Joanne, let's move beyond council itself. Now, you have declared that you're interested in running for council this coming year.
If all goes well, May 1st, I'll be hopefully first in line at the Surville office door. Yes.
Well, are there any other non-council members that have said that have really come out and said, for sure, I'm going forward?
In the news media, for sure, Lyra Evans, who was a school board trustee, is planning to run in Rideau Vanier, she tells us. And we also heard a trustee, Donna Blackburn, long-term trustee. She said she would be a trustee forever if she could. She's been controversial in the past. and our viewers will know that the English Public School Board is right now trustee-less. It's been taken over by Bob Plamondon, who's been put there by the provincial government to sort out whatever issues they may be having. So that's ongoing. So Donna Blackburn said she might consider running for council in Barrhaven, but Barrhaven has 2 wards, and she's not sure which one she would run in. Also, I've heard from Erin Coffin. She came in second to Alan Hubley in Canada South in 2022. She is seriously considering a run as well, so she's looking at that.
Okay.
There's other people, I think, who are like trying to figure out what they're doing, but nobody who has talked like really openly about that. We're not going to out them here on the show.
No, we will not. But we expect names to come forward over the next number of months, for sure.
For sure, yeah. And I think like as we get closer to May 1st, or even after May 1st, there's lots of people who put their hat in the ring in June.
Yeah. And this is the time, too, for candidates to really think seriously if they're going to run. They probably should have been thinking seriously last year, of course, especially if you're running for mayor. But if you're running for a city council ward job, then now's the time where you're really thinking about whether you're going to run and probably have made a decision. Talk with your family over the holidays, possibly, too, because it's very much, a family decision if you have if you're a household with family.
So staying on the theme of election, what do you think will be the most prominent issues?
You go, Sean.
Okay, well, I mean, the prominent issue I think is going to be household affordability. I think it's has been an issue all year. Cost of living, cost of food, utility bills. I mean, you can lump property taxes into that. I mean, cost of living and affordability is really a big topic because it can encompass a lot of things, right? Anything you spend money on. But I think it's going to carry through the year, and that goes also into anything that you pay City Hall. OC Transpo fares, costs for recreation at your rec facilities, property taxes, water bills, anything. So I think that's going to be the theme. It's usually the theme, quite frankly, in many municipal elections, and quite frankly, elections period, is how much we're billing people, how much people can afford to spend on government services. But I do think that's going to be the biggest issue leading right up to the October municipal election.
Yeah.
How about you, Joanne?
A subset of that, I mean, I also think housing affordability. And again, you mentioned a lot of things, food, a lot of things that the city actually can't control. But I think sometimes it's vibes, right? It's who do I think is looking out for me and my household the most? I think a big issue is going to be transit. The cost of transit and the reliability, which stinks. Like, we all know this. Actually, the city, when you have your interim GM of the transit writing a note saying, I'm really sorry, apologizing for the service. I'm not saying it's his fault personally, but one day earlier this month, 800 trips were canceled. 800. The buses are old, they're breaking down. We don't even have the people to fix them. My brother's a retired TTC bus mechanic. I'm always telling him to come up here. I'm sure he can get a good job. But because we need the help. But so I think people are really fed up. There are reasons, and the city has given the reasons for it, sure. But I think that folks are thinking, how did our government let this happen? Aren't you supposed to be looking out for this? I don't want to hear about, the buses were late coming. Why did we sell a bunch of old buses a few years ago under Renee Amilcar? Why is the LRT not open yet? Like, this seems to be a very underreported story. LRT East was supposed to open 2022. Okay, then the pandemic. Then 2024. Then the end of this year. Maybe this Q1 of this year. I'm hearing maybe spring. And then who knows how that will run. So I think, people are kind of tired of hearing excuses from OC Transpo, and I think that that's going to be a big issue.
Yeah, it's interesting because we're seeing this in a lot of elections, John, that cost of living, just writ large, becomes the dominant theme. When we think about Ottawa, I'm tending to agree with Joanne that I think that transit will be the most visible element of that. And also the most visible demonstration of how competent City Hall is right now. Because people understand that that City Hall is responsible for OC Transpo, and that transit is incredibly important to everyone, regardless of whether you ride or not, right? Because of course, if I don't take the bus, but I'm in my car, the last thing I want is more people in their car, right? I want people on the bus. So if the transit system is not working, then there's a lot more competition for me. So I think everyone understands the importance of transit, not to mention, of course, for the people that don't even have that option. And that City Hall is failing, as you say, Joanne, to really provide what's needed. It's very visible. And actually, we see this during budget discussions too, right? Every year, you think about what are the main themes that come up during the budget. It's often about transit, right? Like, should we have youth fares that are free on at certain hours? Or you think back a year, it was about should seniors be charged much more than they have been in the past. So transit, it's a very tangible issue that everyone can get their head around. It affects all of us. So I suspect that might be where we end up if there's no other issue comes forward.
One thing I'll add about, and I agree with you, transit's always part of every single municipal election, whether it's the cost of transit, should the fare payer or the taxpayer pay more for it, transit safety, routes. On the issue of affordability, remember also the federal government is looking at downsizing, right, and limiting positions, and maybe jobs too, like actually people, bums and seats type of jobs. So I think that's going to play into the narrative of the, household affordability, how much people want to spend on municipal services, and how much is in their budget in 2026.
Yeah. So John, I want to pick up on that point you said about who pays for transit, right? Riders versus taxpayers.
Yeah.
And so you want to hear an interesting statistic. Well, a couple statistics.
Of course,
okay.
always.
So the total budget for OC Transpo is over $900 million. We're approaching $1 billion to run OC Transpo for each year. That services a little less than 100 million rides. So if you actually do the math, how much does it cost to deliver one ride? It works out to about $11 a ride, which is, and then of course you think, okay, so when I get on the bus, like I did last night, it cost me $4.10.
Yes.
Now, so I pay $4.10 of that $11. However, the average price that's paid, because of course some people ride on discounted passes, some people ride for free. The average fare for an OC Transpo user is $2.50. So, we're in this interesting world where we are about to approach $1 billion a year program called Transit in Ottawa, and people are saying, are we getting $1 billion worth of value out of this? That's so I think we're really reaching a breaking point in terms of how much we're paying for transit versus what we're getting, and that's why I think this could, if framed properly, this could be.
I don't even know if people think about that. Oh, how much is the OC Transfer budget? Where they're at is, where the hell is my bus?
Yeah.
I'm freezing. It is not here. The shelter's not heated. By the way, we're not heating shelters. And like some of, we'll talk about it later, but like one of the things you might have to do is just get rid of some routes, or at least cancel them on a day, just so that people aren't waiting around for a bus that's not coming. That is, I guess, practical, but wow, that's a big failure of society.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just quickly, like if you're a council candidate, Joanna, it's a tough thing to try to address, right?
Yeah.
I'm hoping I'm not putting you on the spot, but really, when you think about it, like how as a councillor can I help fix the situation? And it's a daunting thing, I would think.
Yeah,
for anyone who's running.
Well, as I plan to say to Kitchissippi Times soon, and I'm having an interview after this. It's a big media day for me today. This problem was many years in the making. It did not just happen.
Yeah.
So a little bit of slack to the mayor. It didn't just happen in the last few years. So it's a huge, like a years-long problem. It's not going to be fixed overnight. It's probably not even going to be fixed to the next term. But we can demand more accountability. We can look for better solutions. Where's our new GM? I hear that we're going to get one soon. The other thing we can do is to try to keep people on is make it cheaper. I don't care. Yeah. Make it. I know people said I'd rather it is more reliable and pay the fare. Well, that's great, but it's not going to get more reliable in the next little while. And in the meantime, give people something. And affordability is important. And I think we could do something on the fares. That's my political answer.
There
John.
we go. There's your platform. Yeah.
Well, you know what? We are getting quite into transit here, and I know that when we talked about today's show beforehand, we were saying let's do transit later in the discussion too, but let's do it all now. Okay. Here's the transit discussion. So, John, can I ask you? there is the promise from the province of uploading the LRT, which may happen before the election, it may not. But certainly Mayor Sutcliffe has put a lot of weight behind this as the solution. Is this really the solution to fixing transit for Ottawa?
Well, we don't really know what that means yet even, right?
Yeah.
What does it mean to have the province reduce the influence of City Hall on the local LRT system? So if it comes down to operations, we have no idea if the province would be a better operator than the City Hall is. If it comes to reducing capital costs, yeah, it'd be great to get a bunch of that dough and put it back in to the transit system the City Hall's responsible for. So we don't know. And I hope it happens. I hope it happens soon. But we really don't know what it looks like for the province to be involved in OC Transpo and in the city transit department.
I mean, I think it's possible it could take years for that kind of a deal to be struck. It's very, very complex. So I can't imagine that it's going to be done in the next 6 months. I mean, it might be, but
Probably
like you as a
not.
taxpayer, I would also like to see that happen because I think Ottawa has been screwed by the province. All of the LRT has been paid in Toronto has been paid for by the province, and we have paid more than a third for both stage 1 and stage 2.
Although, in all fairness to everyone else involved, we as a city were the ones that agreed to that. And,
Because we were first, right? And then Toronto was after that. So when Toronto's came in after. And then we went, whoa, what's this about, right? And they paid for Hamilton's. Yeah.
But I think a lot of it has to come back to, remember when there was we were pretty assured that LRT1 was going to come in for $2.1 billion, come hell or high water, right?
Yeah.
And so that was, how could there possibly be cost overruns? And
actually, you know what? We got 1/3 based on a price tag of 1.8. So for Confederation Line, we only got $600 million only from the province and the feds. So, to be fair, I think Ottawa does deserve some money, but I don't know that that's going to be worked out in, lickety-boo.
Joanne, I want to pick up on your comment about this transit problem has been many years in the making, and I agree with that. And then you remember in 2022, Mark Sutcliffe ran on the banner of fixed transit, right? In fact, I think his line was fixed transit, not free transit. Would anyone say that over the last 4 years or last 3 years that Mark Sutcliffe has been able to do anything significant to fix transit?
I think you'd be hard-pressed to find most people to say that. And I have to say, I remember in the 2022 election, I was still a reporter with CBC Ottawa. John, I don't know if you were at this press conference with the mayor then, or I'm not sure if you had left by then. I think you'd gone off to academia by then. And we were on Laurier Street, literally on the sidewalk, because it had to be on public space with City Hall behind us. He was like, I'm going to fix the LRT transit. And I'm like, how are you going to do it? And then, and especially on the LRT, which had big problems at the time. And I'm like, okay, but everybody wants to fix it. How will you do it? And he said, I'll always remember this, get the right people around the table. And I went, wow, that is the most political answer ever. Who are these people? The magicians. And so I would say this. I think LRT has become somewhat more reliable, the actual service. I don't think there's enough trains in service, and I question if we actually have enough working trains. But the systems we have been, somewhat more reliable. So that's the only thing. It has not expanded yet. Stage 2, very, very late still. Although line 2 and line 4, the Trillium line and the Airport Spur work okay, it seems to me, to be fair. The bus service is abysmal, though, and there are people who need to get to the LRT on the bus. There are people trying to get around their communities. You have people in Barrhaven who can't even get to the LRT in their the time that that the transfer is valid for. They had to have it extended. So I just think that's a giant symbol of it, and people are just they seem to just have accepted it. There was a story that a bus burst into flames a little while ago. That barely made the news. It was on CTV. It was like,
are people just shrugging their shoulders?
Exactly.
Well, I guess that's what happens.
Of course, there's a bus on fire.
Well, listen, last question on transit for both of you is, do you think that the people of Ottawa have lost faith in City Hall to be able to actually deliver a functioning transit system?
Yeah, I think they have. For people who take transit and depend on transit every day, especially people who ride the bus, like you say, Joanne, there's a level of frustration. I was having a conversation with some of my students at the college campus yesterday, and they were waiting for their bus, and and one of the students said, "Oh, look, our bus is arriving, and bye, John." We're saying our goodbyes, and all of a sudden, another student said, "Oh, no, actually, it got canceled. We have 20 minutes now." And I mean, that reflected what we saw in the press this week and the memo that you talked about, Joanne, about the canceled trips and the level of frustration about from people trying to get around the city. I agree with Joanne. I don't have the numbers in front of me in terms of the LRT and its rate of success so far over the past year, but it feels like it's better. People, when at the regular LRT users, and the system is going well, they really like it, right? They really like it. So that's a positive.
But there were switch problems with the snow this year.
There were some switch problems.
Still.
Yeah. But have people lost faith? That's the question. And I start thinking about this because has anyone ever had faith? When was the last time people had faith in Transport or City Hall to deliver a decent transit service? Was it before LRT? When the LRT opened and there was all those problems, was that the start of people losing faith?
Do you remember how the buses, though, were crammed on Albert and Slater during press, and you couldn't get anywhere, and everyone went, what kind of a G7 capital is this? You can't even get on the bus downtown, right? So I think that is true. It's always good to complain about your own transit system, and you go to another city. I went to Toronto. I'm like, this is great, but the people in Toronto complain about theirs.
Yeah, sure.
I also think a transit system will take like any 2 dimes you can find on the ground, like just any amount of money. I want to end this conversation on a slightly positive note. I heard Troy Charter on CBC Morning today.
The GM for OC Transpo?
He is the interim GM for OC Transpo. And he says that right now we have 40 electric buses on the road, and there's a huge delay in getting those electric buses. That's one of the reasons why we're having this big problem, because we didn't actually plan for the delay of those buses. Now he says we will have 110 of those on the road in service by the spring of this year. We're going to have 350 electric buses coming to Ottawa in service over the next year to 18 months. That's kind of a medium-term solution. It doesn't help us this minute and certainly not this winter, but let's see what happens. And let's hope that people are kept accountable to see what's going on with that. As well, 15 diesel articulated buses are also coming as well. So they're trying to do what they can, but again, that's, you can't just order up a bus on Amazon. So it takes a long time.
I bet you could.
All right, let's try. Let's see if we can do it while the show's on.
You can find a lot of stuff on Amazon.
Anyhow, I hope that's helpful.
Okay, and actually my last word on transit is a few days ago I did a podcast interview with the filmmaker that has published 2 YouTube videos or films on OC Transpo. You remember a year ago there was one that came out called "Dude, Where's My Bus?"
Absolutely.
And then so Gio Petty, who I talked to a few days ago, has come out with a second film, "Train to Nowhere," which talks about Line 2 and Line 2 actually, and the history of it going all the way back to the O train. So those that haven't seen it, I highly recommend going to YouTube and looking for "Train to Nowhere" and "Dude, Where's My Bus?" It's actually a great service that he has done for all of us.
Fantastic.
Okay, let's come back to election. And we talked about the most prominent issues that we think: affordability, transit. What do we think might be some of the sleeper issues that no one's really paying attention to now that might end up getting a lot more attention than anyone thinks?
Well, I on the topic of LRT, I've been thinking about this. And I'm wondering when we're going to have a conversation now about if we're going to extend LRT into Canada and Barrhaven, right? So I remember when we were finishing off Stage 1 LRT, former Mayor Jim Watts was talking about we want to get the momentum going for Stage 2 because all the equipment will be around. So we want to get funding in place to keep on growing the LRT system, expanding it out to now.
And really, Phase 1 is useless by itself.
Absolutely, just a crosstown train.
Yes.
But now, as we're seeing, it's going to be in Orleans. We're bringing it down into southern suburbs. And so now we've had a plan kicking around about bringing it to Canada and Barrhaven. Billions of dollars, right? Billions of dollars. We don't have the money at the city to do it. So, and in fact, I think the city has said we need the feds and the province to actually split the cost for this. But now that we're finishing off Stage 2, it's going to be in the next term of council. Do we need momentum to start thinking about stage 3? Is there an appetite for it at City Hall by the next
there
mayor?
volume?
Is there volume? That's the biggest thing too. There is a return to office, there's cutbacks, there's a little give and take there. So I wonder, I don't know if it's a sleeper issue per se, but I do wonder if it's one of these things that's going to come up during the election campaign about where are we going next with LRT, if anywhere at all.
Okay. How about you, Joanne? What do you think is a big sleeper
Well,
issue?
I don't think it's a big sleeper issue, but I do think it's an underreported issue that is sort of indicative of a bigger problem at the city, and that is the taxi class lawsuit. Do you remember that?
I do, yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah,
it
spicy.
was happening for a long time, and that was, it's interesting. Elections, you don't know what the issue is going to be, because in 2014, Jim Watson's running for re-election, won handily. Out of the blue, Uber has started operating illegally, and he keeps being asked about it. He's like, I don't want to talk about this. I'm like, it doesn't matter. You don't get to pick your campaign issues sometimes, right? And he's like, what is happening with this? The taxi industry, led by one taxi company, launched a class action lawsuit saying the city did not uphold its own taxi bylaws in those early days, letting Uber and other rideshare programs or hailing program services exist. Last year, we lost. The city lost. It's $216 million that we are paying to taxi drivers. We are back in court this March. My thanks to Christine Neese from CBC, who wrote, here's some court cases to watch. And it's going to decide how they get paid. Is the city just going to have to give a lump sum? Do drivers have to, apply for this money? Whatever. But also, it's just, yet again, under the table, hundreds of millions of dollars that we're spending that nobody knows about. And I think that somebody could make a real issue out of the fact that, what are our finances like? I think, apparently we bought a landfill this week. I don't.
That's right.
We don't know for how much, because it was in secret. The vote was in public. There's Lansdowne. There's this. Where's this $200 million coming from? That's not chump change, right? And so I think this story feeds into what is the financial management of this city looking like. So I'm not saying that's going to be like a big issue, but I think it's surprising and under the radar, and people could make hay of that if they wanted to.
Interesting.
Although it's hard to pin that on anyone, right?
Exactly. All the people who are involved are
Yeah.
gone, but it is if you're concerned about, where the city's finding money.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what I think might be my sleeper issue of the year, and that is what you referenced, Joanne, just a minute ago about this dump that we just purchased, or this
The mayor would
landfill
like you to
site.
call it a landfill. He asked Arthur White-Crummy. Arthur White-Crummy said, "Did we buy a dump?" He's like, I like to call it a landfill. He's like, well, okay.
That's fantastic.
Well, I got to tell you,
I didn't know that. That's
I'm
great.
waiting for the movie. The movie that, honey, we bought a dump.
Dude, where's my dump? Yeah.
No, and I'll tell
It's
you
an
what.
awful word.
It comes down to your point that we don't know how much we've paid for this. But what we do know from Kate Porter's reporting at CBC is that Taggart Corporation bought this land about a decade ago for $8 million. Now, the question becomes, now they've done some improvements to the land, so that's great. They've got the permitting, they've got the licensing, and that's not
It's a lot of
trivial.
work.
Yeah, that's a lot of work. However, it is it's paperwork and it's process, and it avoids someone else having to do it. But there, of course, one option to the city always has been that it could find its own piece of land, go through that process, and proceed. Now, so we know that Taggart bought this land for $8 million. How much is the city going to pay for it? And I think, okay, if you pay, let's say $25 million, I think people could understand that as being okay.
Oh, it's going to be more than that.
Okay, but
Yeah,
this is the
sure.
thing. You pay $50 million, people are like,
No, I still think it's a good deal at $50 million.
well, okay,
We'll
you pay
see. I don't know.
$75 million, and people are saying, a little bit of a sweetheart deal for Taggart here, don't you think?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there's an issue there, because people look at a development like Taywin, which is pretty hard to argue is not a sweetheart deal for Taggart. Then you look at Lansdowne, sweetheart deal for those proponents behind the Auto Sports and Entertainment Group. And pretty soon you get into the narrative, okay, well, who is City Hall working for here, right? Are they working for me? Doesn't look like it. So that's where I think there's potential for a sleeper issue that really comes back to this dump. The landfill site, sorry.
Yeah, I don't know. And for the voters, for the citizens, what will they make of it? I guess that's what it comes down to every election cycle. What issues really grab the attention of voters?
Sure.
Is it stuff like Lansdowne?
Yeah.
Is it stuff like, obviously, transit, we believe, I think, affordability, a dump purchase? Is the city, how long is the city going to squat on the dump? This is what I want to know as well. Are they going to sit there on the land for a long time? Are they going to do something with it? It's probably for some years until they have to worry about building a new landfill/dump. But will it come into the, I guess, the front burner for voters?
I think
don't
it's
know.
the narrative around it. I think the way Neil talks about it, it's not each issue. Like, is anybody going to sit around and talk about the Taggart Miller landfill site deal the way we talk about it? I hope not, because get a life, folks.
That would be amazing.
But
Yeah,
I
go out
think,
and get a hobby.
this is why I'm here. I have none. But it is true that when you start to look at the narrative of how do we spend our money and how do we make these deals, you know, Neil and I, we disagree. I mean, it'll be interesting to see the price tag on the parts that we disagree with, right? But I mean, I thought, like, the non-disclosure around it, the secrecy around it, the LRT is hundreds of millions of dollars in disputes, I think, and we don't know anything about that.
Yeah.
So, like, I think, you know, when you tell that story, you know, is your city council working for you, that kind of thing, or like that is, I think, how you get into the hearts and minds of voters, not just like, let me go through the 400-page Lansdowne deal, you know, that sort of thing. So, and I'm not sure if how our candidates will do at that.
I don't know. And at the time of the taping, we don't know if council gave staff any direction about an upset limit on a bid, right, for the dump/landfill. So we do not know literally how much that we're going to possibly commit, which is really
I
interesting.
find it appalling that we don't know the price. I'm just going to say right now, it's obvious we bid the most because we won. So who cares if your competitors know what we bid? So we don't know what it bid. We're going to talk about that when the price comes out. But I don't want to go down that path because.
Well, this comes back to the issue that we talked about at our last discussion when we looked at 2025 in review, where the issue you raised, Joanne, was around transparency, right? And this is just an example where has transparency gone way too, the secrecy gone way too far.
Yeah. I would say that council, we weren't sure that was going to happen. Council did vote in open session to buy it, and some rural councillors said no. It was not a unanimous vote, but that part was in open session, but we don't know anything else.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Let's talk about the mayoral race, because that is the,
That's what everyone loves to talk about.
That's the most, that's the one that gets the most attention. And it looks like there's some polling numbers that have made their way into the public domain. So, Joanne, can you tell us a little bit about that?
I heard from several contacts just this morning, actually. There was an OREB, that's the Ontario Real Estate Board, had a housing symposium here in town. And at this, it might still be going on, actually. But this morning, David Coletto of Abacus gave a presentation of his findings of a survey that were taken sometime late last year. Now, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe this survey was really about gauging support, how much support the public has for reducing fees for in housing, development fees, permitting fees. It's really about trying to understand how much folks were worried about housing affordability. The answer is quite a lot, number one issue. But thrown in there at the beginning of the presentation were some slides basically gauging people's political sense. And some of them showed, for example, that affordability is the most important issue to voters by a lot. You know, cost of living first, then housing, then transit, like we talked about. Interestingly, property taxes way down the list. But it also showed how people were voting, and this was really interesting. Again, very early days. It's like almost a year before the election. 49% are undecided. Among the decided voters, 55% say they're going to vote for Mark Sutcliffe, 20% for Jeff Leeper, 25% for somebody else. I'm not sure who that is, some unknown person. So I thought that was interesting. You have 55 to 20, Sutcliffe to Leeper, but pretty much half of people undecided. And what do we all make of that? Let's start reading the tea leaves, because that's either a lot of people or just people not really engaged. What do you think?
Well, I mean, it's still early. We don't know the methodology, I should say, about the survey. We don't know how many people were surveyed, if it was a phone survey, if it was an online panel. I like to see the methodology. Not that I question the
It's Abacus,
Coletto,
so
for
it
sure.
should be like, you know, and
And the numbers show Sutcliffe is way ahead, right, of Leaper, and so Leaper's got some work to do. I'm surprised it's as low as it is, a little bit, but it's still early. The 25% maybe who had another candidate in mind, maybe it's like none of the above, like Brewster's Millions, that old movie, none of the above. But I mean, it shows that the incumbent mayor has a lock on it, unless Jeff Leaper can find a way to to reverse the narrative, I guess, and get some issues that transit is one, probably. I don't know if landfill, but certainly cost of living, I think, would be another area you might want to talk about. So he's got some work to do over the next 10 months, no doubt.
Well, what do you think about the 49% undecided? Because there's two schools of thought in it. One is, go ahead, John.
Well, I think that's really important, the undecided, because if you think back to 2018, okay, when Jim Watson was mayor and up for re-election, and there was no doubt, right, that he was going to get re-elected. And I'm sure if a similar poll had been done back then, the undecided would be much smaller, and the support for the incumbent would be much higher. So I think what we're seeing is that it's a pretty open field. Now, obviously, Jeff Leaper is going to be disappointed to see those numbers that he's polling so low, and he, as you say, he's got a lot of work ahead of him, but he's also got a lot of opportunity. And I think with that 49% that are undecided, that certainly does present that there's an opportunity for all of this to change quite dramatically.
I think it's hard to know how much to read into undecided. Sometimes it's people who just don't want to tell you. People who are just like, I don't know, isn't that like a year away? I have no idea what I'm voting for. I'm not paying attention until Labor Day. People, there are times where you see that the undecided split may more or less like the decided votes. But in this case, I do think there's an opportunity for that. I do think there's a big opportunity because this was last year, right? And so, yes, I would have liked to have seen. I think I would have expected to see Jeff Leaper a little bit higher, but I also think that the undecided part of it is a big opportunity for him to move in to say, okay, here's how I can do things differently. Because we just talked about a huge long list of things that makes why people are unhappy with how things are going. There is a very interesting slide, which I always am interested in how people answer these questions. One slide is like, do you think this city is headed in the right direction? And most of the people say, no. That is the largest thing. And yet, you have most of the people voting for of the decideds saying they're in favor of the incumbent mayor, right? So how are both those things happening at the same time? Now, of course, a lot of those people could be in the undecided part, right? Like I don't think the city's going in the right direction, and I'm not sure who can change that.
But they're not sure Leaper is the person, by the sounds of it, by the sounds of that result. So yes, we're not going in the right direction, but when we look at who we have in front of us to vote for at this point in mid-January, well, maybe the incumbent might be the person that they would prefer.
And of course, this poll was taken last year, so Jeff was probably a little bit less active.
Right,
but it'll be interesting to see. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that goes. It's interesting to see those numbers. I got it from a couple of different contacts who were there at this meeting today.
So last question about the election. Let's just talk about timing. Just remind people of timing. So when does the election campaign open? When does this council essentially become a lame duck? And stop making real
Never.
decisions? Well,
It does not.
does it not?
It doesn't. I
Okay.
love lame duck. So lame duck, there's two parts. Oh, I'm so sorry, listeners, and viewers know. There's a lame duck council means that more than 25% of council is either not running again or did not get reelected. So there's 2 points you can look at that. The election campaign starts May 1st. That is when people can register, and you are not a candidate until you are registered. You can say you want to be a candidate, but you're not one. That nomination period, that registration period ends at the end of August. At that point, if you don't have more than 25% of councillors who are quitting, it is not a lame duck council. They can do whatever they like.
Well, thank you for that civics lesson.
Yes. And then again, when at the end of the election, if 25% of councillors were not elected, are not returning, again, they're in a lame duck period. And lame duck period means you cannot make any major decisions. You can't make any new expenditures over $50,000, which is nothing. And you can't make any big HR moves, like get a new city manager, that kind of thing. So, yes, I just looked this up recently.
Okay.
And last time it was a lame duck because it was
Yes.
like a huge number of people didn't run again.
But I think what you're saying, John,
Well,
is that
informally, like the traditional summer break happens, I don't know, end of
July,
June,
yeah,
July, right?
yeah.
But this year especially, where all of a sudden councillors are going to maybe have some big policy decisions before they leave City Hall for the summer, but everyone's mind is going to turn to the election campaign for sure. And so in terms of the informal lame duck period, probably into the summer, towards the election, that's not to say council might have some agenda items to take care of in the early fall setting, or seating, I should say. But I think informally, things are going to get quiet policy-wise, heat up campaign-wise in the summer.
There's also, there's always planning decisions that have to be made. There's decisions that are have to be made for legal reasons,
Yeah.
right, through legislation. I would say, though, that as much as council is allowed to make a big decision, it doesn't look good, and they don't usually do that. In the 2022 election, you guys will remember that the police board hired a new police chief. Now, that is not a council decision. The police board is allowed to do that, but 2020 year was a bit of a controversial year in policing in the city, if we remember. Convoy.
Yeah.
Talk about issues you don't want to campaign on, right? Like, who would have foreseen that? So hopefully we don't have a convoy situation in 2026. But that was terrible. And it was a controversial decision. People were really mad, and so I think the council should stay away from any major decisions, basically anytime after July.
Yeah, okay. So let's turn to what we know is coming forward. I guess there's no lame duck period. But what's coming forward to council that they will have to deal with in the mean term, in the near term, and what are some of those big decisions? So we talked about the taxi settlement. We talked about the landfill site. The other big issue that we know that's coming forward is around the capital asset management plans. Now, we on the pod have been talking about this for a number of months now.
No one has talked about this outside of the finance department of the city as much as us. I believe we are number 2.
Yeah, that's fair to say. But we have heard the mayor come out and say that it will be coming back to council in the first quarter of 2026. So
not the plan, but the long-term financial plan on how to pay for it.
that's right.
Yeah.
And so the big outstanding issue is we know that there is a multi-billion-dollar deficit in terms of how much money we need to pay for the infrastructure renewal. So, and just a little lesson here, we remember that we took care of
So educational, this show.
Yeah, that's
I know.
right. We took care of the rate side. So in other words, how much you pay on your water bill, we took care of that last year. And that covered a couple billion. We still have another many billion to...
more than 7
That's
billion,
right.
so quite a few.
More than $7 billion that we need to find to figure out how do we pay for the road repairs we need, how do we to pay for community centers, for arenas, for fire halls, basically for all of the municipal infrastructure, and there's a lot, other than the sewers and the water pipes in the ground. So, John, let's start with sort of building on the election theme. Mark Sutcliffe has positioned himself as the low tax guy, right? We've seen that message come out on numerous occasions. But when we look at this massive deficit that is coming our way, how does Sutcliffe manage that? Because, on the pod, we've talked about the need there's the inevitability of an infrastructure levy. But let's be honest, that a levy is just a fancy way of saying a new tax. So how does Mark Sutcliffe square this circle?
Marketing. No, it's right? You have to build a case. You talked about, we figured out the pipes, the part of it, right, through the rates. But look what's going on. There's a narrative happening right now across the country. Calgary, right, massive pipe burst and causing a lot of drama for all Calgarians there. We just had a big pipe burst on Baseline Road this week in Ottawa.
There were 32 calls for water main breakage problems over the holidays.
And so, so maybe they figured out the rate part and the pipes and the sewers, but it's still part of a larger narrative about municipal infrastructure. So if you're a mayoral candidate, maybe you're collecting your video, whether it's from Ottawa or from other cities, experiencing infrastructure failures, and saying, look, we've got to do something. Municipalities all across Canada are facing the situation. Ottawa is one of them, and we've got to do something to save some money to repair our infrastructure, whether it be the pipes underground, roads, municipal assets that are buildings. and we have to figure out a way to pay for it. And I don't know, infrastructure levy is pretty much an increase of property taxes, but maybe you have to build a case and go to the voters and say why you have to increase taxes to pay for these things.
Another year, many, many years, and in fact, decades in the making of governments and the public. We're also to blame. We don't want higher property taxes, but you can put off the maintenance for a long time, and we paid kind of these arbitrary low taxes. I don't want to pay giant taxes or double-digit taxes for sure, but 2%, 2.5%. Who was fixing the pipes and the roads? Nobody. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know what? In all fairness to all of us and everyone else who supports the idea of I don't want to pay any more taxes than I need to, a lot of the infrastructure that we benefit from today was built for with provincial money. And so then the question becomes, okay, and if you think about it, given that cities only get, what is it, like 8-10 cents on the tax dollar of every tax dollar, is that enough, right? And clearly it's not. And so there is well, again, we've talked about fiscal federalism also on this pod many times.
We have all the funny subjects here. No,
Don't even get me started on pills.
Great. We lost on the pills.
I know.
Okay. All right.
But
Side
actually,
issue.
Joanne, I want to ask you about a very specific topic, and that is how do we deal with what are called end-of-life assets? So the classic example here is the Belltown Dome in the West End in Bay Ward. So, and I actually went back and looked at the committee discussion from last June when they first talked about infrastructure, and Teresa Kavanagh, whose ward covers the Belltown Dome, asked the question: there is no funding in this plan to consider end-of-life assets like this one.
Yeah.
So how are you going to do it? And the response from
Bad. Super bad. So really good catch. I had, it was a long discussion back in June. I had not really caught that part of it. It's kind of alarming. So as you say, Teresa Kavanagh, the Bay Ward councillor, who is running again for election, said, how is end of life planning for buildings not part of the asset renewal plan? One of the staffers said this about the long-term financial plan. It has been identified as an issue that renewal funding, so basically replacing something that's old, is not capturing buildings that reach the end of life and is a financial need we need to address. Isabel Jasmine, one of the deputy treasurers, says that the city is going to add a new category to the long-term financial plan that's never been there, and it's a category called replacement. And she says they're going to look at what other municipalities can do, but somehow it has not been conceived of in the long-term financial plan on our in how to deal with the asset management plan. We have a plan apparently that looks at all the buildings, all the roads, your community centers, pools, and the kind of infrastructure investment that it needs to keep it going, but not to replace it. And she says they have a new category called replacement. It is a new category that we can't solve right now. That we can't solve right away. So it should have set off more alarm bells. There's always a lot of news happening and not enough people to follow it. But it sounds to me like we don't know what we're gonna do when things are so old they gotta be shut down, and I don't think we can rebuild them.
When they're done, and they're going to sit there,
Or be knocked down, and put a condo there. People will lose their minds.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of what the city should do. That's the narrative of the election, right? It's are we going to be just a government of big projects, or are we going to actually deliver the things that people expect from us? Roads and water and community centers, rec centers, the transit, goodness, the day-to-day part of life, right? And so I was shocked to hear that. So good catch.
Yeah.
I don't know how you remembered that, but that was amazing and amazingly bad. But
well, I mean, listen, I agree with you that I'm surprised more people didn't pick up on this, because Teresa Kavanagh was able to associate it to that specific asset, which has been, in the news unfortunately for all the wrong reasons, right?
Sure.
But it is it is the canary in the coal mine. It is what we should expect with, particularly for that the outer urban wards. that are just, this side of inside the green belt.
Well, for our neighborhood, what does it mean for Tom Brown Arena, right?
And for any of those facilities
Yeah.
of that vintage.
Which is most of them, because we
Right.
built everything in the 60s, including the roads, and that's why everything needs to be upgraded now, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I have one more issue that we should look in early 2026. We had a big splashy announcement between Mayor Mark Sutcliffe and Prime Minister Mark Sutcliffe? The
Mark Carney?
Mark Carney? No. Oh, yeah. He's not both things. The Marks. So Mark Carney, Mark Sutcliffe, big, exciting announcement on partnership between Build Canada Homes and City of Ottawa to build up to 3,000 affordable housing units. The details of that, it's like a $400 million partnership, which makes me wonder how much of that is the money
Yeah.
we're going to pay as a city. Those details are supposed to be coming to council sometime. I heard Q1. Who knows if it's going to be delayed, but that'll be a lot of details because it was very good news event, but
Yeah.
again, devil in the details. So that's something we're going to be watching and digging into for sure.
Yeah, it's surprising. There was a lot of specificity around the numbers, but remarkably little detail. And tell me,
They're
is
probably
this,
figuring it out, frankly.
well, yeah, but at least in terms of how much the city's contributing versus what the feds are
Yeah.
contributing.
I mean, it cannot be a 50-50 deal. That'll
No,
be too
no.
crazy.
No.
We have taxi lawsuits to pay for. We can't
Yeah.
be putting that money in that. Yeah, so
But do we even know the location of where these units would be?
I think some of them, there are things in the works. So, for example, the Heron Road, you're going to have to help me with that. There is some federal land that was
the federal land
already.
was there, yeah.
There was federal
The
land that they were.
Beachburg Rail Corridor?
Line
why they
everything
have
up
them.
down the rail corridor.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and so there's that is happening as well.
Okay.
I also want to give a public service announcement this week. 2 days, I think Wednesday and Thursday. Alto, the high-speed rail, they're having open house and presentations at Bayview Yards, both in the afternoon and evenings. I just think people might like to go to that. See where the high-speed train is going to be coming through. The Montreal-Ottawa part of it.
Okay.
So that might be fun.
Let's put a link to that in the show notes.
Great.
That's it for this week. So we're 2026 off to a start. This is what to expect for the year ahead. I have one announcement to make actually before we close off, and that's that part of the election year, part of what we would like to do to make citizens more engaged and more aware of what the issues are is to have some town halls in the community where people can actually come up and say, here's an issue, here's what I think about it, can we get this on the agenda? So we're doing the first of these town halls largely on the issue of transportation. So it's how do we get Ottawa moving again? It's taking place on the 28th of January in Blackburn Hamlet. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. And it's really a chance for community members to come out and say, here is what I would like to see as some of the ideas for that should be discussed during the election about how to improve some of the issues that we're dealing with. Issues around congestion, issues around transit, issues around alternative ways to commute, whether that's cycling, whether that's walking. John and I will both be there. Unfortunately, Joanne, you cannot join us for this session.
No.
But we will be joined by a couple of other guests. The idea is the panelists will have a few ideas to get things started, but we really want to hear from members of the community as to what are the top issues for them. So hopefully you can join us for that. And on that note, I'd like to thank both of you for the discussion today.
Thanks,
Thank
Neil.
you.
Okay, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. This has been the Better Ottawa Municipal Panel.